should have a much more exports-driven view of the world. Our second principle that we set out is that we want to protect nature. And we know that nuclear is some of the most land density energy around. And that's why we've set out plans already which would make it cheaper and easier to build nuclear by disapplying the habitats regulations and environmental assessments which are adding extra costs to the build. And that's because if you have an energy source which is using almost 3,000 times less land, to protect a tiny piece of habitat whilst carving up much more just doesn't make sense when it comes to nature. We also know that we'll need some new gas power plants too. That's something that I said in the role and I repeat today. And our third most important principle is this. The most important thing that we would prioritise is cheap, abundant energy, and we would do that unashamedly. So that's why we've said we will repeal the Climate Change Act, because at the moment the legislation is putting decarbonisation on a higher footing than cutting bills. And that forces ministers to make lots of decisions in government. I saw some of those firsthand, and some of those decisions are making our lives more expensive than they need to be. We already have some of the cleanest electricity, but it's the cost that's deterring people from adopting heat pumps and adopting electric cars. So making it even more expensive is the worst possible climate policy. And as I said, at the moment, the government is going to be giving people more and more taxpayer-funded handouts to people to buy electric cars and electric heating at the very same time that they're making electricity more expensive. It's simply counterproductive. If we want people to buy electric heating, then we should make electricity cheap. If we want them to use an electric car, then we should make electricity cheap. If we want people to start data centres for our industry and for our households, I unashamedly believe that the biggest priority we should have at the moment is to make our electricity cheaper. So I'm about to tell you about some policies, which I think will be unpopular in this room, but if I leave you with one impression, it's this. My single focus in this Parliament will be to work with anyone whose primary interest is to make our energy cheaper. So our first policy would be this. It would be to axe the carbon tax on electricity generation. The ETS and carbon price support were introduced to drive coal off our system, but we no longer use coal, and we all recognise that we will need gas to keep the lights on for decades, so it's just adding extra costs to our bills. And because gas is the marginal price setter, the ETS and the CPS are inflating the cost of almost anything that doesn't receive a CFD, and that's feeding through to consumers in higher prices. And aligning with the EU's ETS has increased the carbon tax by 70% this year alone, whilst the carbon price support, as all of you will know, doesn't exist in the EU at all. Again, with some of the cleanest electricity in Europe, we think taxing electricity generation in this way is counterproductive, and frankly, it's wrong. Second, the Renewable Obligation Subsidy Scheme. This scheme has been around since 2002. We closed it to new entrants in 2017, but we think it's time to end these subsidies because the consumer cannot afford to pay up to 3 times the market price for electricity. Now, those two policies alone would take 20% off electricity bills, not just for 6 million homes or 100 schools, which is Ed's policy, but for everybody's. And what the country chooses to do with that cheaper electricity, in my view, is up to them. However, I suspect if we can make electricity cheaper, then all of the things that the Climate Change Act requires them to do will be much more attractive and therefore much more likely without needing taxes and mandates. So in front of us, I believe, is a question, and the question is this. What do we want for consumers? Do we want choice or do we want force? I believe that choice will win. So whilst I don't know if I'll be welcomed back next year, I'll leave you with this final thought. An energy policy that doesn't work for consumers won't work for decarbonisation. And we cannot lose sight of that most fundamental truth, that our energy system is primarily here to deliver cheap, reliable energy for the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. We now move to a conversation between Fintan Sly, CEO of the National Energy System Operator, and Dara Vyas, CEO of Energy UK.
So that was the first of our political speeches for today. And I think many of you commented over lunch and in the breaks of how exciting it is to hear from such a range of politicians at today's event. So I'm going to kick off by asking you, Fintan, sort of just to reflect on some of the politics of today. We've had, I think it's come up in every single speech we've had. And you've obviously, the National Energy System Operator has now been formally established for exactly a year.
Yeah.
So, and it's been a year of significant political attention on energy. So just your reflections, really.
I mean, Claire, as always, speaks really, really well. And I think what you see is there is a very lively debate, and energy is a dividing line between the different political parties. And I suppose because energy is so important, like the tagline of the conference is "Energy Matters." It's the lifeblood of society. It's the lifeblood of the economy. And in essence, it's about how do you balance three things, that old sort of adage of the trilemma. So how do you balance affordability, security of supply, and sustainability in the long term? And what you see is different politicians, different political parties taking different perspectives on the relative importance of those things over different time frames, and what is important now versus what's important in the long term. I think one of the really key things that we need to look at, though, which Claire talked about a bit, is how do we bring communities and societies with us? It is a contentious debate, and therefore people see that being debated out and sort of wonder about, you know, should we go left, should we go right, should we do this? But we are in the midst of a huge change in our energy system, and we need to make sure that we are having the right conversations at the right time with people, with communities, such that we can bring them with us, and that we have a clear narrative around what is the infrastructure we're building, why are we building it, and bring them into that at the right time. I mean, it's no good going to them after all of the decisions have been made to tell them that, you know, this piece of infrastructure is going in their community or their back garden. So, I think there was several things in what Claire said that I think, we really do need to make sure that we have a clear narrative on. But in terms of the policies, you have the leader of the Liberal Democrats and the Secretary of State coming later, and I'm sure they'll give you a perspective on the politics of it.
So we'll get you back up and also ask your views on that as well.
I mean, one of the benefits of the way NESO was established is that it is independent, and it wasn't just independent from National Grid or independent from industry, it's actually also independent from government, and a lot of thought was put into how do we establish the board and the governance and the framework around all of that such that it is independent. And it is independent, and it has at its heart a legislative duty to balance those three things. I mean, that's written into legislation, is NESO's duty to balance those three elements of the trilemma.
Absolutely, and a big part of that is because you have to be enduring, right?
Yeah.
The investments that you're thinking about, the plans that you're making, they have to last for decades, and so the enduring nature of NESO is so important. This time last year, Fintan, you sat on this stage and you told our audience that the 2030 target was a Herculean effort. And while so many of us still talk about 2030 in the context of ambitious but achievable, I'd love to get your take on where you think we are now. Would you still use that objective? How would you describe the challenge ahead of us for the next 4 years?
I mean, Hercules had a busy year, right? But I think it still remains a Herculean challenge. I think that the scale of what needs to be delivered to get us to clean power by 2030 is absolutely huge, and it's going to require us to do things differently in different ways than we've done before, at a different pace than we've done before. I think if you look back on the last year, there have been things that give you hope and things that sort of less so, maybe. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've seen lifting of the onshore wind ban in England and Wales. We've seen the Planning and Infrastructure Bill move through Parliament. But we've also seen development pause on Hornsey 4. We've seen supply chain pressures come through, both in terms of lead times for equipment and costs as well. So I think, looking at it in its macro sense, I think the scale of the challenge remains absolutely huge, Dara.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would disagree with that. Talking about the scale and just reflecting on the year you've had, obviously there are so many strands to the work you're doing, and so much of it did kind of start to become more public with the Connections portal. Do you want to share a little bit about kind of learnings over the last year, things that you think, because everything we're doing it's all the first time, isn't it? A lot of this is the first time that we're doing so much of this, and ahead of us we've got the spatial energy plan and we've got the regional energy spatial plans, and again those are all the first time.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, I suppose it's been a year of first, and maybe to reflect on the Connections portal piece, because undoubtedly that was not us at our best, if I'm honest about it. I think that we, it was more difficult for our customers to engage with us and to submit the evidence that we asked them for than we would have liked it to be. Hopefully, people in the room who did engage through that process saw the team step up. I think our ambition, and we clearly said it, was to make sure that when we did get to the end of the submission window, that there was no project that wanted to submit evidence and move into consideration for Gate 2 that was unable to do so. But I think, hand on heart, it was more difficult for people in this room and all of our customers than we would have liked. Connections reform, though, is probably one of the biggest things that we're going to do this decade in the energy system, moving from that singular long queue of 850 gigawatts to a much more aligned queue that is of projects that are ready to go, with dates that they're committed to, aligned to that sort of clean power ambition, and longer term aligned to the strategic spatial energy plan. I think that the policy was over 2 years in the making, with many of the people in this room and around the industry involved in that. So it's a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
We're moving now into the formation, sort of considering all of that evidence that we got, moving into looking at how do we form that queue then, what are those projects that move through to Gate 2, and how do we stack them up on a technology and a regional basis. So undoubtedly, looking back on the year, that is the one thing that was really difficult. You mentioned some of the other stuff that is moving. So the strategic spatial energy plan, moving ahead. I mean, the concept of that we'll come up with a national plan that shapes how investment and the energy system looks over the next quarter of a decade. Like, it's a huge challenge, and making sure that we engage with the industry, that we bring people with us on that, and that we work through all the various bits is really important. And for the organisation as well, standing up regional teams, regional offices, like setting that up is a new thing, and we're sort of a long way through building teams, establishing offices in 11 of the regions and nations right around the country. So,
and I guess it will be new for so many of the stakeholders as well. We often talk about in local and regional government, we haven't necessarily got people with the expertise and knowledge, so you'll be taking stakeholders with you, I think.
Yeah, and different regions are in different places in terms of sort of their journey with energy, the expertise that they have, the level of constraints they have on resources. It is a really different picture as we go around. So it's trying to find how can we tailor the support that we bring. This shouldn't be us coming in providing some sort of top-down cookie-cutter approach. This really is about trying to go in and work out, well, what are the things that this region needs, and how can we convene the stakeholders in the region in a way that is helpful and productive for that region.
So just on the connections piece, I think everybody in this room probably really is grateful for your how candid you're being about the experience of it. And from an industry perspective, I think it very much felt as though the response from NESO after the issues was it's really good. I think you have to try things, and I think it's about how you react when things go wrong, and as much as things going wrong. I think if we stick with growth for a moment, if that's okay, NESO's grown so much, and you talked about the regional aspect, and one of the big challenges for the industry is how we navigate an era where the energy system is changing, the way we use data and technology is changing, and the balance between national equity and local diversity, it's really at your door, isn't it?
Yeah, and one of the things we talked about a lot as we were going through the process of setting up NISO, both internally and with stakeholders, was it is a very different organisation. We weren't just taking a business unit out of National Grid and saying, there you are. So it took on a whole lot of, and you can look at the tangible things, like we took on a set of new roles, and you can tick the boxes to how we're doing taking them on. But I think more important for the organisation nearly was thinking about how the organisation engages and interacts with the industry, and we recognised like we had to find a way to be more open. I talk internally about like coming out of that ivory tower and engaging with people and meeting people where they are, and I think that cultural shift is as important as the various different roles that we're taking on as well. It's about how we deliver this. The other thing we're conscious of is that we need to work to get clarity on the difference in roles between ourselves and Ofgem and DESNZ, and we have heard the feedback around that, and the three organisations are talking to try to work that out and provide sort of a framework that is a bit clearer, because we recognise it isn't always, maybe, especially outside looking in, it isn't always as apparent or as clear as maybe it could be.
Yeah. We had Jonathan on earlier from Ofgem, and there was a conversation around governance, and NISO came up, DESNZ, but also we've got GB Energy, we've got the National Wealth Fund, we've got the Crown Estate. Governance in the energy system has changed quite a lot in 15 months, hasn't it?
It is, and there's a whole lot of new organisations there, which in some cases makes sense because there's new things being done, or we're doing things in new ways. So there's no one doing regional energy strategic planning before we came along. But if some of the stuff is just an adaptation of what was done before, and trying to make sure that actually we are really clear about who's doing what and who's responsible for what, so there isn't duplication, or there aren't things that just fall in the gaps.
Yeah, I think from an industry perspective, kind of getting that clarity and knowing who to go to for what is the main thing, because it's just an extraordinarily busy time. Last week you put out your winter outlook. Did you want to tell us a bit about that?
So I mean, looking at the winter outlook this year, it's a good story, right? So margins heading into this winter are slightly better than last winter. Main reasons for that are commissioning of the Green Link interconnector and a number of largely batteries coming onto the system. So margins slightly better, well within security of supply standards. I think the system operator will always say that there will inevitably be periods during the winter where margins are tighter. There's an operational toolbox that we have to manage through that, and we're sort of confidently looking forward to this winter.
Good. I think the sort of next thing I'd really like for us to talk a bit about is data, and how you're using data and how you're changing things, because you've had to grow and stand up a team in quite a short amount of time to deliver an awful lot.
Yeah.
What role do you think data is going to have in our future energy system, and how do you think it's going to deliver benefits to customers?
So data, and I would to some extent bundle that with AI as well, though I think it has the ability to transform the system. I think at the moment the industry, and I'd include ourselves in this, we're not as proficient or as systematized in using data as we could be. But one of the things that we're looking at doing is this initiative around data system integrator role, right? And how can we provide a framework that allows for the transfer of data in a much more seamless way. When you look at other industries, technology, data and AI has been the thing that has unlocked new business model, new ways of working, and huge consumer value. Before it happens, it's very hard to point to the specific thing that does it, but underpinning it in a lot of cases, the thing that sort of upended business models, that unlocked huge consumer value, is around data. Increasingly we're seeing it around AI as well, and the infrastructure to allow that to be shared and to be used an awful lot more.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think data continues to grow as one of the things, and AI as well. But one of the issues that we keep returning to, and I think we've probably mentioned in every session today already. And alongside that is sort of customer cost and value, and how data can optimise both value to customers and also get the best price. Do you think we are doing enough on that side of things when it comes to cost, from your point of view, from where you sit?
There's maybe two ways to look at the question there. So I think it's undoubtedly true that it's undisputably true that energy costs in the UK, the electricity costs are higher than our peers and our neighbours around Europe, and that is having an impact, right? So are we doing enough? Could we do more? I think we always have to challenge ourselves to do more in that space to get energy costs down. So I think that absolutely we need to do it. And that's everything from, as we look at out into the future, the SSEP, how do we make sure that as we think about the pathways, as we think about the choices, that we are appropriately balancing those three elements of the trilemma such that we get the most efficient cost for consumers for an energy system at the end of the day. And then you have near-term challenges like managing constraint costs. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing projections of those rising really, really significantly. And therefore, you know, we're working really hard with many people in this room, with DESNES, with Ofgem, to make sure as that package of things, which is reform national pricing, which, you know, will sort of crystallise into a package of reforms, that the elements within that are capable of mitigating those rising constraint costs, and we've got to look at that. The other piece, I think, which links back to data, Dar, which is worth maybe stressing or reinforcing, is from our perspective, and it goes back to that culture of how do we engage differently with people. Like, we don't have all the answers, and I think only by us being transparent about the data we're using, the modelling that we're doing, and like there's people in the room here who can probably do many bits of it better than us. And I think we are on a bit of a journey to try to make sure that we expose all of that data in a way that we can, and that is useful for people as well, right? There's no point in just reams and reams of numbers. Like, trying to make sure that we are open and transparent with the data, with the models that we use, and then how have we used them to inform the decisions that we're taking. An SSEP that sort of pops out of a box and no one knows like what informed it or how did you get to that weird set of things. Like, that's not going to help bring industry people, politicians, everyone with us.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think SSEP is a big issue right now, and I think we're really keen to get into the detail of some of the data that's going into that.
Yeah, and the team are working, you know, with Dara, with some of your team who've been really, really helpful, and with industry, and we're looking to publish something, you know, an update around how the models. I think one of the concerns is how do we, in particular, get transparent around the cost data that we're using for the different technologies, while also respecting the confidentiality associated with the data that we're given. And, you know, we're just trying to balance those two things. And I think, you know, we'll continue the conversation with you, with the other trade bodies, with the industry, just to try to make sure that we're hitting the right balance on that.
It's really welcome. I think that being just a year in, NISO is still a really fledgling organisation, isn't it? And I think we've got the opportunity here to get so much of that collaboration and transparency right, haven't we? I'm going to stick with that theme a little bit, if that's okay, and just think a little bit about, in a year, you've grown the organisation massively. What's it like? What's the vibe like? Because what someone once said to me, they will remain nameless, they said it's kind of start-up culture in a massive place. What's it like?
So it's great. I mean, I think we have a cohort of people who are really passionate about the things that NISO is doing, and that sense of purpose within the organisation is really, really strong. We're really conscious as well so we came out of National Grid only a year ago, and National Grid has a really, really strong culture. Like, culture is deeply embedded within it, and it has elements that are absolutely brilliant and great, and that we want to make sure that we port and we keep. That, you know, it has a sense of purpose, that coming together in a crisis, that that are really, really important. There's also elements of it that just aren't important for an organisation like NISO, which work really well for a multinational organisation or whatever. But because we've grown and we have all of these new people starting as well, there is the opportunity to shape that culture in a way that you don't often get in an organisation. So we're trying to be quite deliberate about what are the things we want to do. So we're also starting up a regional organisation. So what does that mean for an organisation that in the past had an office in Woking and an office in Warwick? Now it's going to have 11 offices around the different regions and nations. And how do we think about that? And how do we think about being a part of those communities that we're present in? So yes, what the vibe is like. So we had a colleague conference over a number of days there recently, and there really is that sort of sense of excitement about it still, which is great. Even after a year, there is that sense of excitement. I think inevitably there is a sense also of, oh my God, all of these things that we have to do, and a deep desire not to let people down, and that's why Connections felt so hard internally, was that we knew we'd let people down, and that it is an organisation of people who care deeply about what they're doing, but also care deeply about delivering that service, and that's why that was difficult, I suppose.
Thank you. Let's project forward in 2026 when we're sat here, if you and I are both still sat here. What would you like to be reflecting on? What do you want to go well in the next 12 months?
There's so many big ticket milestones for the industry, I think, over the next 12 months. I think it will be, we talked earlier about Clean Power 2030. I mean, the next 12 months will be, pretty deterministic as to whether it remains within reach, I think. When I think about NISO and the things that we're doing, there's probably a few things. Well, one, many people in the room will recall back in 2019 when we established ESO as sort of a standalone entity within National Grid. We set out this ambition at the time to be able to operate the system at zero carbon. And it was wildly ambitious at the time. We are actually sitting here at a point where we have all of the tools and the processes and the services on the system, the engineers trained in the control room, such that if the conditions on the system manifest themselves, that we can do it. There's a change in the grid code around standards that's with Ofgem. We just need that to hopefully get approved soon. So hopefully it may happen before the end of the year. If not, it will be early next year, because effectively we need the market to bring forward enough renewable generation in a particular summer. That, I think, will be, it's not that we want to tick a box that says, we said this back in 2019, aren't we great, we've done it. It's that actually, if you think about the day without coal, and that was hugely impactful in accelerating that sort of sustainable and proving that it can be done, not just here, but internationally. I think this will do the same thing. So I'd love to be here talking about it. I think we will. But looking forward to 2026, we've talked a little bit about SSEP. So SSEP will be a huge thing next year. By the end of next year, we'll have gone through the piece where the Secretary of State selects the pathway. We'll have taken that through statutory consultation, strategic environmental assessment, and it will be the strategic spatial energy plan, and that will then start informing all of those investment decisions. It'll start informing it before we get to the end. But if that ends up, my other ambition is, if that ends up like in a file folder stuck on a wall in 55 Whitehall, we have lost. It has to be something that does actually enable us to do the things we want to do, like get infrastructure built quicker. One of the key things was the SSEP, because it will have been through that strategic environmental assessment, should have the ability to enable the infrastructure that it outlines to get through that planning and consent quicker. So we shouldn't lose sight. It isn't a plan for the sake of a plan. It's a plan to enable us to make some of the changes we want to do. And the only other one I'd mention is there's no conversation about 2026 that's complete without putting connections reform in there. So we'll have delivered connections reform. The new queue will be sort of operational, and we'll have a new process which is embedded as BAU and running and sort of taking the next batch of projects through that. So, I mean, even those alone are a huge thing, and there's loads of stuff I didn't mention, like AR7 and many other things.
Yeah, I think we need to stick with Herculean for 2026. I really liked your mention of the kind of the day without coal as well, actually. I thought one of the things that struck me is over the years how much, actually I suspect most people in the audience, show of hands if you have the NISO app. Keep your hand up if you look at it once a week. I think you should all get it. It's really good.
We need to sell a little bit more.
I know,
think
you need to get it. I thought, this is
definitely.
something that all happen. I think,
Data and AI. We need to make it better.
Data and AI. No, I think the app and the kind of the conversation it stimulates within our membership is really brilliant. I think it's a really nice way of making that sort of thing accessible.
Yeah.
And if you were to look out to, say, 2030, at what point do you feel like NISO's job is done, Fintan?
Oh, I don't think NISO's job will ever be done, right? I mean, to some extent, there's a real-time operational element to it, and I think AI and robots will come on in leaps and bounds. I'm not sure by 2030 we'll have taken all of the humans out of the control room. So I think that will always be the case. But the energy system, I think, will continue to evolve and change. New technology will come on, be that on the consumer side. Like, we haven't yet seen consumer flex take off, right? We've talked about it on the verge of taking off, and we got the consumer flexibility strategy published between ourselves, DESNZ and Ofgem, but that needs to take off, and that will dramatically change how we talk about things. So I think there'll be a level of continual change within the energy industry, and hopefully NISO can help then by drawing together the different strands and doing that sort of whole system thinking. How when you join it up, does it make sense for GB PLC? How can we do it and join it all up in a way that brings people's society with us and delivers, on all three elements of the trilemma?
Yeah, that's a very fair answer. Sticking with demand, one of the things we often get from other business groups and some of the large industrial users and others is demand connections. Where are they? What happens? How can we improve where we are on the demand side more generally, both on the household customer side but also business?
Yeah, I think that the issue of on household side, probably affordability and cost is the big issue when you get down to it. I think on the other extreme, the question of strategic demand, the large AI data centers, how do we make sure that we can connect them up? We're doing a lot of work with DESNZ and Ofgem to work out how we can help those large strategic investments that need connections. How can we facilitate them? But at the moment there is a queue. It's in date order. Demand is assumed to be strategically aligned. But I think initiatives like the AI growth zones that provide sort of a template and allow sort of investment to make them ready for connections is really, really important. One of the other pieces as well, I think, is bringing down the lead times for infrastructure. So, when Nick Windsor did his Networks Commissioner report, that was aimed at trying to bring lead times from the 10 to 12 years down to the 6 to 7 years. And that makes a huge difference if you're an investor who wants to invest. If you get a lead time that says, well, you can of course connect, but it will be 2035, 2037, that's just not an option. But if you can bring that closer, that makes all of that much easier. So bits of the puzzle that we're doing, like SSEP helps with that. The strategic or the central strategic network plan will also help, because that will allow us to start building out those networks a little bit ahead of need as well.
So I need to bring us to a close. I'm going to just try and reflect on some of the things we've heard this morning, and I feel like we keep wavering between optimism and pessimism all day. So I'm going to ask you where you are in terms of the energy transition, the UK's trajectory and the energy industry in terms of whether you think we can get it done?
So I'm very optimistic. All right. I mean, I think there are a huge number of really big challenges ahead. But if I look at how over decades, over years, how the industry has stepped up and responded, I think, within Great Britain there is the ability to actually address those challenges and get on and do it. But, back to what I said to you at the very start, to get there, and if we're just talking about 2030, we're going to have to do a load of stuff very differently and very much quicker than we have ever done before. But I am optimistic that we'll do it.
And that's an excellent note to end on. Thank you so much, Fintan.
No, thank you. Are we done?
Thank you, Fintan and Dara. That was a really interesting conversation. Next, we'll hear from the Young Energy Professionals Forum, a network of over 3,000 people working across the energy sector.
Please welcome Conor Inez, the chair of the forum, and Isabella Oratore, vice chair, as they present key findings from the forum's recent survey on what young professionals think about working in energy today.
Don't worry. In the spirit of Sam from LCP Delta earlier, we are very aware we are standing between you and the next cup of tea, so we won't drag this out for too long, I can assure you. But good afternoon, and welcome to the short session on the Young Energy Professionals Forum. My name is Conor Innes, I'm the chair of the forum, and I'm a freelance energy consultant.
Yes, thanks to those of you who stayed, we appreciate it. I'm Isabella, I'm vice chair of the forum, and I'm an energy transition investor.
So, for those of you who aren't so familiar with the forum, it is a free nationwide forum with around about 3,000 members representing approximately 350 companies spread across the country.
Yep, and we do about 20 events a year, and those range from really fun things like seeing the NUSO control room. We also do wind farm visits. We also do, like visits to OEMs doing EV manufacturing. So lots of really cool things that hopefully you're thinking, I would like to do that. We also do things like networking, panel events, lectures, those kind of educational things as well. We also hold annually our parliamentary receptions at the House of Parliament, and also have our YEP Awards, where we basically celebrate all of the rising stars in the energy sector.
So, to get a bit of an understanding, better at least, of people that are here, for a quick straw poll, can you raise your hand if you entered the energy sector in the last few years?
Like 5 years.
I'm going to admit that's more than I had expected. We can call it a significant minority, at least. So perhaps more relevant, or you should reasonably ask yourself the question, okay, so why do I care if I'm not at that younger end of things for the industry? So if you'll indulge me again, if you raise your hand if you know someone or work with someone that has entered the energy industry in the last 3 years. So I think I'm slightly hard-pressed to find the people that haven't got their hands up there. So that's why we're here talking to you about the forum. We want to tell you about what we do so you can signpost your colleagues that are earlier in their careers towards this, so you can support them better, you can get more out of them.
Yep, so we also annually do our Meeting the Challenge survey. This is essentially to give us insights on why people come to the industry, why people leave the industry, kind of what we can do better to support young people in the industry. And essentially we have a survey open right now, and also we have results from last year to kind of share with you. We had some really interesting results. So, for example, 90% of YEPs said that the industry was meeting their expectations or actually exceeding it, which is great. Congrats, guys. And also that they would like to stay in the industry for at least 5 more years. So that's kind of really positive signposting for people to say that they're actually enjoying their careers early on. We also have a large majority of people, and actually by a mile, this was the biggest result, that people really wanted to contribute to climate change and addressing net zero as the largest kind of factor of why they joined the industry and why they stay. So we have a few more kind of stats around this as well, but which you can read online. But yeah, I think it goes to show the kind of sentiment in the industry of young people.
So, you'll have a range of speakers and views on how attractive this still is for new employees into the industry, but I can only encourage you to look at hard data instead of the rhetoric on this. But my personal views aside, there were obviously big challenges that came up when we looked at people here. The lack of understanding of the clear pathways into and through the industry was a huge part, and likewise the location of the different things. So, on the career pathways, there's certainly a lot more that we can do on making it clear what the opportunities are. So I think it was Saul from UKPM that expressed it very well, that the industry's not very good at talking about itself on the whole. Like, if, particularly energy networks, if things are going right, you're not going to notice. It happens in the background, you only notice when it goes wrong. This is very much something that we should shout about more. We are definitely getting better at this, but there's a long way to go. And I said, we, the sector, the industry, it's a very nebulous sort of term, but what I actually mean is you. I mean, your companies, like, you understand these issues. These aren't going to be surprises to you. You'll have had to go through the exact same thing and the same problems. The difference is now, the majority of you are likely in positions where you can do something about this. You can make things happen to address these barriers, to make it more well known the opportunities there are for people. So the YEP Forum is very much here to help with all of that. So a couple of years ago, we produced a report on the different jobs in energy industry, which is obviously freely available on our website. Those perhaps the younger hands that were up with the first round of questions might be more interesting to you. If you leave the companies, please don't blame me. But we also do, as Isabella was saying, tons of events, 20 events a year. You can get face-to-face, hands-on in some cases, with some of the actual physical machinery that powers this entire energy system that we do. Like, it can feel a little bit ethereal at times when you're sat in offices or discussing policy. So we get people to understand the physical basis of it all. We'll bring people into rooms to discuss ideas, to meet new people, to understand these opportunities. On the location, not so much we can do about that, I'm not going to lie. That's more on your end of things. But again, it should be a little surprising, given the majority of jobs are outside London and the South East. This really echoes back to what I was talking about earlier. We need to be better at talking about the opportunities there are, educating people to go, look, we do all this really cool stuff. As was shown before, the climate is an important motivator for people. This is a practical way to do it. So, communicating what we're already doing seems to be a pretty low-hanging fruit that we can pick up here.
Okay, and shameless plug, sorry guys. If you could whip out your phones once you're done downloading the NISO app and just point it towards the QR code. Thank you to the one man here who's actually doing it. Okay, we saw people. You should have a link which will take you to a LinkedIn post which has the survey on it. I would really, really appreciate it if you could please share this or tag people in it who might fill it in. So it's people, anyone you know who's less than 10 years in the industry. Essentially, we're really focused on getting as many responses as we can. We usually get a few hundred, so it means that our data is pretty robust. It also means that this year, with our increased focus on apprentices and apprenticeships and people who have not followed a university route, we can also get more people. So I would actually also like to ask you how many people here entered through a university route or went to university? That's yeah, 80%.
Minimum.
Yeah, minimum. That's not bad. So we actually ask everyone that everywhere we go and everywhere we speak, and it's pretty much always the same. This actually wasn't too bad, but usually it's kind of 80 to 95% of the room all went to university. For us, we feel like there's a real skills gap in the country, and it feels like there's a missing opportunity to get people who are doing apprenticeships and other kind of routes into the energy industry this way. So we're really trying to encourage that, and part of that starts with collecting the data we need on why people may or may not be doing apprenticeships. So please share this with anyone who you think is interested in that or who has done an apprenticeship.
So, in the spirit that no one ever complains that the speech was too short, I'll start to wrap this up and simply thank Energy UK and NISO. I've lost you completely. But NISO as our major sponsor for this year and last year. Their support is essential for us being able to do everything we do. Naturally, I will suggest that you point your younger colleagues or those new to the industry towards the YEP Forum so they can get involved with all this free stuff. It doesn't matter if they're a new graduate, a new apprentice, someone that has a few more years in the industry like me, but if you want to find out more, if you're potentially interested in running an event with us, we will be around for tea and biscuits afterwards. So if you want to come and have a chat either, always very welcome as long as you bring the biscuits. So before I entirely relinquish your time, I just want to impress upon you one small thing. It's like every time that we do open the door slightly, that we get more people in with the relevant skills we need, it means we can do more. We can do more with our energy system, we can do more with our individual companies, we can do more with the country. So thank you for your time, and we hope to see you at the YEP Awards on the 6th of November, or for tea and biscuits. Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Connor and Isabella, and yes, please do come along to our YEP Awards taking place in early November. Just before we break for another short break, and we'll be coming back to our next session at 3:20 p.m, I just want to point to the screen where we have a QR code. Hopefully those at home can see it as well. Please do scan that QR code. It will take you to fill out a short survey run by Public First, which will allow you to compare what the average thought is at this conference compared to the national average across the UK, which we'll be using in our next session. So please do come back for 3:20, and thank you very much.
bit more who strongly oppose and oppose, support is still really quite high among the country. You tend not to get bars like your yellow one when you ask people in the country what they think about things unless it's free money. But support is really relatively high, albeit less high than it turns out the sector. What is much higher, although still quite a lot lower than this sector, is support for new renewable energy. What we find consistently and have done across the years is that while there is some growing questions about net zero and the costs involved, there is generally a view that renewable energy is an important part of energy, is secure, and just feels clean. So there is definitely much greater political opposition on the right to net zero than is currently reflected in the country. What is true, which I don't have a chart on today, is that the relative importance of climate has gone down because questions like immigration and health and basic public realm have gone up, as has cost of living in the last few years. However, another area where you differ a little from the public, there is a lot more concern about the trade-offs between cost and speed on climate targets. So the green, the top is the country, the bottom is you, says that the government should move faster on its climate targets even if they have to pay more for it. And the red says they should avoid any extra costs even if that means that they miss their climate targets or go more slowly on them. And what you'll see is some more opposition than support, but a rough split in the country about whether they're willing for the government to speed up or whether actually they'd rather it slowed down rather than bear costs. And on those costs, actually this is the one question where you seem remarkably aligned to the population. There is a significant percentage, nearly half, who think they have personally experienced higher costs as a result of the country's efforts to be more green. Since I assume that this is the great expert community, I'm assuming that your answer reflects the actual truth, and therefore the country is exactly accurate about this. Another proportion, around a third, think they've not experienced any change in costs. Almost no one thinks that their costs have been lowered. You always get far more don't knows whenever you ask people questions than you do in anybody who tends to go to these sorts of conferences. But I think underneath that, and I didn't ask this question because I didn't think it would show very well on the screen, there is another, I think, more important trend that's going on. We tend to focus a lot in polling on headline support and opposition to policies. And as I said, headline support for net zero actually remains relatively high for the public. And I think spend too little time on two other questions. The first is, as I said, the relative importance of climate and net zero has declined simply because people feel poor, they feel the NHS isn't working, and they're incredibly worried about illegal migration. But what is also true, and this is one example of a question, but you could ask any of about 30 questions that get at this, is that public cynicism and scepticism about government's ability to deliver anything in any area is at a record low and is declining in every single poll that we do. So one of the challenges for net zero and indeed any other policy is people do not believe what governments are going to say because they think they have nothing but a track record of failed delivery. And that infiltrates how they respond to anything that is announced as a policy. A good example of this recently was when Keir Starmer announced digital ID, and you saw support for that policy decline very substantially after the announcement than when you tracked it to perform the announcement because a politician said it, and a politician they don't like. And this is one of the critical challenges, I think, for any policy making in the UK. I thought I'd finish on one final extremely pessimistic note, because we've done this for Energy UK a few times in the past, which was to ask the public how much of their bills they think are going directly into the pockets of energy companies. It is probably fair at the moment to say that people do not understand the structure of the energy market or what an energy company does. But you will have all said, as you can see, that it's around 2 to 5%. Some of you say it's 0 to 1%. You're all hovering up at the top. A lot of people don't know, but those who do, and I'm going to focus on the bottom line, which removes the don't knows, think that you are somewhere between 10 and 30%, with a not insignificant percentage that think you're making over 40% profits. So they think there is money to be spent on lowering their bills, and they think some of it should come from you. So we have people who are roughly supportive of climate, They don't care about it as much as they used to. They definitely don't think politicians can deliver it, and they think more of the money could come from you. But the only way is up. Thank you.
Thank you to all three of our speakers. I'm sure you can agree, really, really interesting topics that I'm sure we could have discussed for much longer. I promised them one question, but we must keep very, very pithy answers so that we don't keep the right honourable lineup that we have for the rest of this afternoon waiting. So just one really quick question to you all, really. We are sat in front of a room full of industry professionals, politicians. What is your one message to them? Sorry, it's not an easy question. There we go. I'll start with you, Simon.
Yeah, I mean, lots of ways we could go with this, but I think we'll keep it simple. Don't believe everything you read in the papers, especially when it comes to climate and energy.
Perfect. There we go. Pithy. And
I think be bolder. If you were a visitor from Mars and you looked at our government, you'd think it was a minority government or a government with a tiny majority. We all know the problems we face, whether it's social care, net zero, property tax, the reform of our tax system. Do one of those things while you have a majority of 160, because God knows the polls tell us we might never have a majority of 160 again.
Thank you very much. Ed Miliband is on his way, so we can tell him personally later. Rachel.
I actually totally agree with that. But from this, I would say show, don't tell. No one believes what you're saying anyway. So you might as well get on and do it.
Excellent. Some brilliant advice. So a big round of applause. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much to all our speakers. You've been excellent. You've just had a little insight into how our Lightning Bolt talks work there, so I think that was the best advertisement we could have given you, so please come along to our next session. For now, I would like to welcome to the stage the Right Honourable Sir Ed Davey, Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Hello. Thank you, Sean and Max, for the introductions, and thank you, David and Energy UK, for inviting me to speak to you today. It's good to be back. Colleagues, we are at a critical moment in our country's energy debate, especially on how we best tackle the problem of high energy bills. Energy bills are too high, and they've been too high for too long. The typical family is having to pay £60 a month more than they were 5 years ago, and British businesses still face some of the highest electricity prices in the OECD. So whether it's the cost of living crisis hitting millions of people, or the rising cost crisis so many businesses are facing that's holding back the economy, we have to bring energy prices down. Now, while that's a statement that has rare cross-party support, the answer to the question, how do you do it, certainly has no consensus. And it's that diverging politics on how to get energy costs down that I want to address today, and where you have a crucial role. For there's one school of thought, and I presume Claire set it out earlier, that says getting energy bills down is relatively easy. Nice, easy solutions, typical for the likes of Nigel Farage, and regrettably now Kenny Badenoch's Conservatives too. They say rip up our climate change commitments and then magically bills will somehow come down. It sounds simple enough. They pretend bills are high because we're investing too much in renewable power, and they pretend that if we stop that investment, they will suddenly fall. Simple, beguiling, and terribly, terribly wrong. So wrong, in fact, that it can be tempting to just dismiss it as fancy economics and refuse to engage with that. But that would be a big mistake. Refusing to engage hasn't stopped Farage's lies from spreading. It hasn't stopped the Conservative Party turning its back on climate action just a few years after Theresa May legislated for the 2050 target. When you understand how important renewable energy is to our economy, how only renewable energy can deliver permanently low prices and energy security, we have to be honest with ourselves. We haven't done a good enough job at countering their myths. So now the cross-party consensus on investing in renewables has been shattered. Now, we've long said that climate sceptics have their heads buried in the sand, but if we, the people in this room, the energy industry as a whole, and all who want to cut energy bills permanently, if we don't take on the lies of Farage and Badenoch now, it will be us who have our heads in the sand. We either take on their myths or we fail British families and the UK economy for at least a decade. So we have to be clear, first, about what their plans really mean for energy bills and our economy, and second, about what actually needs to be done to bring bills down and boost the economy, our positive vision of a future where everyone feels the benefits of cheap, clean, renewable energy. So let's start with the Farage-Badenoch plan to rip up the Climate Change Act, abandon our net zero target and stop investing in renewables, to rely more and more on fossil fuels. That would be a catastrophic mistake. We owe it to our children and grandchildren to ensure we protect the planet for their futures, and that means giving business the reassurance it needs to find the solutions for the very grave challenges we face. Not my words, the words of Conservative former Prime Minister Theresa May. Turning our back on this progress now risks future investment and jobs into our country, as well as our international standing. Not my words, the words of Conservative former Business Secretary Alok Sharma. Now, I haven't always agreed with Theresa May and Alok Sharma, but on this they are absolutely right, and speaking up against their own party takes courage, and I thank them for it. But as well as using those arguments they put forward, we need, above all, to win this one. The Farage-Badenoch plan would fail on its own terms. It wouldn't cut bills, and it wouldn't strengthen energy security. We have to expose the whole premise of their plan for the lie it is. Power prices aren't high because of the price of renewables, because, as you all know, electricity prices aren't set by the price of renewables. Almost all the time in the UK, electricity prices are set by the price of gas. And that gas, so beloved of Nigel Farage and his mate Vladimir Putin, and Kemi Badenoch, is more expensive than renewables. Gas price is higher, more volatile in price than renewables, more dependent on imports than renewables. So whether it's cutting people's high energy bills or making us more secure on energy, the answer isn't to make ourselves ever more reliant on fossil fuels. The answer is to make ourselves less reliant, generating more cheap renewable power, thereby decoupling the electricity price from gas. You know this. You know this. At our conference, the Lib Dem conference in Bournemouth last month, my party adopted a comprehensive plan to do just that. It included a number of ideas from Energy UK and others in this room. So thank you. And I hope you don't mind a bit of plagiarism. Ideas like using new technologies to help people use smarter technologies, energy more flexibly at times when it's cheaper, or working together with our European neighbours to trade energy more efficiently, cutting costs and reducing reliance on gas. I've long been an advocate of interconnectors, and one of my proudest moments was signing the deal with National Grid and Statnet for the North Sea Link back in spring 2015. And I think that is playing a part, along with other interconnectors, to make us more secure and to keep costs down. We just need to re-engage with our European neighbours on it. And for our plan at our conference, we borrowed other ideas too, like the Pot Zero proposal from the UK Energy Research Centre to move older renewable projects off expensive renewable obligation certificates and onto cheaper, longer contracts for difference. The contracts that Liberal Democrats introduced when we were in government that have helped to bring down bills, and which are private law contracts that can't be ripped up. Richard Tice. With other well-trodden ideas, our package, ideas like insulation and energy efficiency, our package taken together has the potential to halve energy bills within a decade. And I believe that should be the government's, the nation's ambition, nothing less. It's actually far more deliverable, far more ambitious than the Farage-Badenoch nonsense. And over the next few years, I want my party to engage with you to show in even greater detail how these much lower energy bills can be and would be delivered with the right policy framework. And to start that engagement, we have to be clear-eyed about the challenges that come with such an ambition. Expanding renewable power won't happen on its own. It means bringing down the cost of manufacturing, seeking lower costs across the UK, European and global supply chains. It means securing earlier local support for grid investment, grid strengthening, through community-led planning and community incentives. And of course, it means rapidly increasing investment in Britain's renewables. Fortunately, we know how to do that because we've done it before. Between 2010 and 2015, we quadrupled the amount of renewable power generated in the United Kingdom. And to give due credit to the man coming after me, crucial to that framework provided by the Climate Change Act, and that was passed by Ed Miliband with cross-party support in 2008. Now, under that framework, from 2010 to 2015, we drove massive investment with electricity market reform and the introduction of contracts for difference. And then Vince Cable and I put in place industrial strategies across key energy sectors. We showed the world we were serious. And as a result, we attracted global firms and financiers to come to the UK and spend tens of billions of pounds to build factories and wind farms and create thousands of clean, secure jobs. With many firms in this room, we made the United Kingdom the world leader in offshore wind and cut the cost of onshore and offshore wind power dramatically. I still remember the moment we broke ground on the Siemens factory in Hull, where they now produce blades over 100 metres long for offshore wind turbines in the North Sea. That factory has created 1,300 jobs in a city that once had the country's highest unemployment. It has breathed new life into a dock long after its original purpose died. Once ships left Alexandra Dock in Hull full of coal, be burnt in the dirty power stations of the past. Now ships leave Alexandra Dock carrying wind turbines to be installed in the cleaner power stations of the future. That is British ingenuity and ambition at its best. And that's the same ambition we need today, not just on wind and solar, on the grid, and so many other clean technologies of the future. It's even outside your sector. Clean flight. Clean flight, we have been a leader in aviation, surely we should be a world leader in clean flight. Tidal power, manufacturing power cables and upgrading the grid. We could be world leaders on all these. And if the UK can lead the world in all these growth sectors of the world's economic future, just as we did in offshore wind, we can do that, I believe, if we have the vision and create the stable, certain, predictable, consistent, investable policy framework that we did with low-carbon energy, with electricity market reform that powered the offshore wind revolution. But expanding renewables is key, but we need more to drive people's energy bills down quickly. We urgently need a comprehensive long-term programme to insulate people's homes so they are much cheaper to heat. The government's Warm Homes Plan is a start, and I know Ed Miliband had to fight tooth and nail with the Treasury for the funding. But after 15 months, we're still waiting to see the actual plan in full. We need far more urgency from the government on this. Let me give you just one example, air-to-air heat pumps. These are magical devices that heat the air directly rather than using radiators, making them ideal for flats and the million or so homes with storage heaters. And crucially, they can also act as air conditioners, which will come in handy as we experience more scorching summers like the one we had this year. But unlike other heat pumps, you can't get a grant to install one. That needs to change. To be fair, the government on air-to-air heat pumps at least have recognised that. Earlier this year it consulted on extending the boiler upgrade scheme to cover them. But here's what I mean by a lack of urgency. That consultation closed in June and we've still heard nothing. Just imagine if those grants had been available over the summer. Imagine how many families would have fitted one to help get through those scorching August days. So my message to Ed Miliband today is, please, get on with it. And the government needs to be more ambitious about new homes too. I'm glad the government listened to Liberal Democrat calls for a rooftop revolution with solar panels on all new homes by default, saving families hundreds of pounds a year. But here again, I'm afraid Labour is still being too timid. I can't understand why they still haven't reinstated the zero carbon home standard that was supposed to come into force a decade ago, but was scrapped by the Conservatives after the 2015 election. So again, Ed, please, get on with it. And while we're on the subject of making buildings cheaper to heat and reducing our reliance on gas, here's one more area to focus on: low-carbon district heat networks. We need more of them. When I set up the Heat Network Delivery Unit back in January 2014, I thought we'd have got a lot further by now than we have. But there's an enormous opportunity here to use wasted heat to warm people's homes, bringing down energy bills and carbon emissions. Like in my constituency of Kingston Surbiton, where waste from the local sewage works at the Hogs Mill could be used to heat thousands of homes. We call it poo power, and it has great, potential. Not just in Kingston, but at scale across the country. And imagine getting the water industry to work collaboratively with the energy industry. Wouldn't that be a thing? So far, I don't think the government has fully grasped what an opportunity this is, but if communities could benefit from cheap, renewable heat at cost price, and I want to underline that, at cost price, that could be transformational in decarbonising millions of homes. So there we have it. Two very different visions of the future of energy and the future of our country. On the one hand, Farage's vision, taking inspiration from his idol, Donald Trump, cancelling investment in cheap, clean, renewable energy, pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement, destroying the countryside with fracking, shackling families and businesses to expensive, volatile oil and gas prices, playing into the hands of fossil fuel dictators like Putin, putting up bills, destroying jobs and hurting the economy while climate change rages on. That is Trump's America. We mustn't let it become Farage's Britain. Instead, let's choose the brighter vision of Britain leading the world, as we have so many times before, with ingenuity and innovation. A future where we invest in the cheapest, cleanest sources of energy: sun, wind, tidal, hydroelectric. A future where people see the benefits in lower bills, warmer homes and better jobs. And a future, I hope, we can work on together, as we did before. But that hopeful future means winning today's political argument on energy bills now. An argument we must also work together on now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Ed. Our final keynote of the day comes from the Right Honourable Ed Miliband MP, Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero.
Well, thank you so much. And can I say it's great to be here with you this afternoon. I think I should start by offering really sincere thanks to Energy UK for hosting this conference. And I want to pay real tribute to Dara Vyas for her incredible leadership over the last year as CEO. So will you join me in just giving tribute to Dara and the great job that she is doing? I will let you into a secret. Because I'm the last speaker this afternoon, I was sort of worried there would be kind of nobody left. So as I was arriving here, I accosted two people on the doorstep, and I said, "Oh, you're not staying for my speech?" And they said to me, "We actually weren't here to hear you. We were here to hear David Willits." They turned out to be from UCAS. That is the lesser-known UCAS. It's the UK Accreditation Standards Body. So I learned something, that there are two UCASs in the world. But thank you to all of you for staying. But thank you more for all of the work that we've done together over the last 15 months and before that in opposition. And can I honestly say that in a challenging job, the best part of it by far is the chance to meet with you and work with you on a shared agenda for the country. And so I just really want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I know we don't always do what you want us to as government, and I'm sure you'd want us to do more of what you want us to do. But I can honestly say it's an absolute pleasure to work with people from across the breadth of this industry. And I think one of the reasons why, maybe the main reason why it's such a pleasure to work with you, is just what an incredibly exciting time it is for the sector. And if I think about what we've been able to achieve in the last 15 months, I think it's only been possible because of our work together. So we've consented record amounts of clean energy, enough to power the equivalent of 7.5 million homes, including just today Tilbridge Solar Farm, which alone will power hundreds of thousands of homes. We're ending the first come, first served grid connections queue, and you'll have heard from Fintan earlier. We're introducing the biggest reform of planning in a generation. We've set up GBNews. We're investing in the biggest nuclear building programme in half a century and kick-starting our carbon capture and hydrogen industries. And I say this with all seriousness, none of this would have been possible without your advice, support and delivery. Now, I think all of those achievements aren't just a list of achievements. I think they speak to a wider purpose, and I think it's a shared purpose between us, which is that, yes, about this government's clean energy superpower mission, but I think that is part, I think I hazard to say for all of us, of a bigger vision of a fairer, more prosperous economy. Soon we'll publish our Clean Energy Jobs Plan, which will show not just the hundreds of thousands of good jobs that already exist in this sector, but also the 400,000 additional jobs we expect to be created by 2030. And, you know, place by place, I think probably all of us in our different ways can already see the difference that this is making and has the potential to make to our country and to the kind of economy we have, because these can be good jobs at good wages that provide people with a decent standard of living. But having said that, we also know that creating an economy that works for the many involves tackling the long-running cost of living crisis that so many people face. And that's what I wanted to focus on today. And you'll have heard others talk about this, I'm sure, during the course of today. And I know that we'll be judged on the success of our mission in delivering for consumers, and rightly so. So I want to make an argument to you today, and this is my case. First, that our exposure to fossil fuel markets remains the Achilles heel of our energy system, keeping bills high and giving us no long-term certainty over price. Second, that we face further challenges of historic underinvestment in our energy system and growing electricity demand. And the choice for the future, therefore, is what kind of energy system we want to build, not whether we want to build it at all. And I'll say what I mean by that. Third, I believe that building clean energy is the right choice for the country, because despite the challenges, it's the only route to a system that can reliably bring down bills for good and give us clean energy abundance. And fourth, I want to talk about how, as we build this new infrastructure, the government is determined to work with you to bring the benefits to families and businesses as quickly as possible. And after that, you get to all go home or have a nice time. So, look, first, memories can be short in Westminster, but I think we should never forget, and I'm sure in this room you don't, the huge damage to family finances, business finances, and the public finances caused by the energy shock we've been through in recent years. And it's a shock that still reverberates today. And the reason for this damage, as we all know in this room, is because the UK was and is so exposed to international fossil fuel markets due to our dependence on gas across the economy. Even today, wholesale gas costs for households are still around 75% higher than they were before the energy crisis. If they were at pre-crisis levels, bills will be more than £200 a year lower than they are today for families. The same story applies to business. Industrial electricity prices soared at the start of the energy crisis and have remained stuck at high levels. So while it's true that we've inherited a system of paying for network and other costs, which is less weighted towards public spending than other countries, a large part of the issue facing industry in the UK is our exposure to fossil fuels. As UK Steel said earlier this year when talking about why they and other energy intensives were paying higher electricity prices in the UK than our European competitors. And I quote, they said, the main driver of the price disparity is now wholesale electricity costs driven by the UK's reliance on natural gas power generation. And I think it's also right to say, going back further than Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that this has been a long-standing weakness at the heart of the British economy and society, with half of our recessions since 1970 caused by fossil fuel shocks. And looking forward, and again, people's memories can be short, this remains a massive risk, particularly at a time of global instability. According to the OBR, if gas price spikes occurred once every decade, it could cost the UK between 2 to 3% of GDP annually. So I think, and this is my first point, and I'll end on this point and then move on to my second, anyone who tells you that we can solve the issues of energy security and affordability without addressing our reliance on fossil fuels seems to me to be ignoring the evidence before our eyes and this country's recent painful experience. Second, of course, this isn't the only challenge we face in our energy system, and all of you know this well. In the years ahead, we expect a massive increase in electricity demand, and I'm sure Fintan talked about that, around 50% by 2035 and a more than doubling by 2050. Now, it's really important to say this. This is a massive opportunity for us. This is the age of clean electricity. We hope to clean electricity that we're looking at. And we want to seize those opportunities, the electric vehicles that are cheaper to run, new industries such as AI, the benefits of electrification across the economy, indeed the benefits to households of electrification, which so many people in the industry talk about so compellingly. But we face growing demand, and at the same time, we've got a legacy of decades of underinvestment in our energy system to overcome. And I think whatever power sources people are in favour of, they need to confront this reality. Much of the UK's current nuclear fleet began operating in the 1980s, and of course we haven't brought a new nuclear power station onto the system since Sizewell B 30 years ago. At the same time, according to NESO, half the existing gas fleet has already been operating for over 20 years. And the reason I make this point is to listen to some people talk, I won't name any names, you'd think there was a free pass to just carry on using unlimited gas in an unlimited way from existing stations for the next few decades, but that isn't the case. We could decide to stop building renewables and just rely on a whole new fleet of gas-fired power stations, but we need to be candid about this. That would involve the costs of building and not just operating those plants. And the underinvestment, of course, as you also know, the underinvestment we face isn't just about generation. Much of the electricity grid was built in the 1960s and hasn't been upgraded since, and I'll come back to this. So the second point I want to make is the reality is there is no alternative to investment in both generation and the network, both to keep the power system running, but also to seize the opportunities and indeed meet the needs of the future. Takes me to the third part of my remarks. If the question, therefore, is not whether to build, but what to build, I want to say why we believe clean power is the right choice for the country. Let's be absolutely clear what the cheapest sources of power are in this country, according to levellised cost estimates. Solar power and onshore wind. Strike prices for solar and onshore wind in our last auction, AR6, were nearly 50% cheaper than the levellised cost estimate to build and operate a new gas plant. Offshore wind, despite global cost pressures, was also cheaper than new gas. And at a systems level, and this is really the logic of our mission that we developed in opposition and that we're carrying through into government in a consistent way, the prize of a renewables-based system supported by nuclear and other technologies is really important to spell out. It gets us off the fossil fuel roller coaster, and indeed Clean Power 2030 will mean volatile gas sets the wholesale electricity price much less often than today. It's homegrown clean energy, which cannot be weaponized by dictators or petrostates, giving us much greater energy sovereignty, and it will significantly lower the wholesale costs of electricity, which will benefit heavy industry and has the potential to bring down consumer bills for good. Now, I want to acknowledge something important at this point. Wholesale prices obviously aren't the only costs paid for by consumers, and we need to fund investment in energy infrastructure, including in the upgrade that is now sorely needed because of previous neglect. I talked earlier about transmission infrastructure. This will be familiar to you, but in 2023, the previous government estimated 4 times as much transmission infrastructure needed to be built by the end of the decade as has been built since 1990. And that network infrastructure is what is now being delivered under this government. It's important to say this, though. Even taking this investment into account, the Climate Change Committee was clear in its Carbon Budget 7 advice, and I quote, "As the electricity system decarbonises, with wind and solar displacing unabated gas, the underlying costs of electricity supply are expected to fall over time." Now, of course, I want to just be clear that in this majority renewable system we're building, we'll need a mix of energy technologies. That's why we're driving forward not just on renewables, but on nuclear, storage, CCUS, hydrogen, and gas will continue to play an important backup role for some time to come. And as I've also said, but it's worth emphasising, people are entitled to advocate for more fossil fuels and less or even no more renewables. Some people do advocate for that as part of this mix. But here is the reality that I think those people need to confront. They would leave us more exposed because we don't control the price. They're more expensive to build and operate. They would leave us losing out in the global race for the jobs, investment and industries of the future which you are all creating. And of course they would drive a coach and horses through our efforts to tackle the climate crisis. That's why we believe that clean power is the right choice for the country. And the task ahead for government and for all of us together is to bear down on the costs of building, which face significant upward pressures, and work relentlessly to translate the lower wholesale costs of clean power into lower bills for consumers. So let me say something about how we're going to address those challenges. And we're looking at all of the tools at our disposal. How public investment can help reduce costs. And I'll give you an example. We're doing that through Sizewell C, for example. Using reformed national pricing, which we're working on with Fintan and others, to plan and build a more efficient system which provides the right incentives to build the right generation in the right places. And by the way, as you all know, when there's a debate about constraint costs, that network infrastructure is absolutely crucial to reduce those constraint costs. And also, and I want to underline this point too, relentlessly focusing, and this is our responsibility as government, focusing on value for money in each and every decision we make. I'll give one example. We've halved the subsidy for Drax Power generation as part of the negotiations we had with them. And this approach will be what we apply also to the upcoming auction round AR7 and beyond, where delivering value for money is our top priority. We've made reforms to the auction, as you will all know, to maximise competition between bidders and reduce the cost to consumers. And there are multiple pathways and technology mixes that can get us to Clean Power 2030. I do want to be clear about this. We won't buy at any price, and if specific technologies aren't competitive, we'll look elsewhere. We will take the long-term decisions to secure the right amount of capacity at the right price for the country. And in the coming weeks, I'll set the initial budget for AR7, working with the Treasury, and we'll only go beyond it if it delivers clear value for money. Now, as we drive towards clean power, we know that there are many struggling with bills now. And that takes me to the fourth part of my remarks about what we're doing to help families and businesses. This winter, and I'm incredibly proud that we are doing this, we're expanding the Warm Homes discount to give nearly 3 million more families on the lowest incomes £150 off their energy bills. And this is really overcoming an old and very arbitrary system which said if you didn't live in a quote, hard-to-heat home, you didn't get the Warm Homes discount, which was depriving millions of people of the help they frankly deserved. We're increasing support for 7,000 energy-intensive businesses, and we'll shortly publish, and we're very excited about this, we'll shortly publish our Warm Homes Plan, kicking off Britain's biggest programme of home upgrades in generations, backed by £13.2 billion of public investment to upgrade up to 5 million homes over this Parliament. That was announced in the spending review. And the Warm Homes Plan, as you all know, will help families with the cost of solar, batteries, heat pumps and insulation to lower bills and tackle fuel poverty. And I think in this room, we all know the potential this has to bring the benefits of clean electricity to people and to lower their bills. It's something that consumers with the means to do so are already taking advantage of. And we want, and this is the point of the Warm Homes Plan, one of the points of it, we want to spread those benefits much more widely so it's not just a privilege for those who can afford it. Alongside this, and this is particularly important in the light of today's NAO report, we'll reform the system of consumer protection and advice to help make families make the choices that work for them and ensure the highest standards of installation. We also want to go further. That's why, another announcement that we made in the last 15 months, we will ensure new homes are built with solar and clean heating as standard. This is a common sense policy which frankly has been demanded by the public, championed by industry, and will be delivered with the Future Home Standard. And if I can make one plea just before I finish, we don't just want to stop at new homes. It is one thing I've been struck by in this job over the last 15 months. It's that solar power offers a cheap and quick way for people and indeed communities to generate their own energy and cut their bills by hundreds of pounds a year. But currently, just 1.5 million homes, around 1 in 20, have solar installed. I mean, this is a massive, massive opportunity, as I say to my department a lot, to cut bills using the free resource of the sun. And I am determined to try and extend this possibility to millions more people, much more than get it at the moment. And I want to work with you, and there will be others we're working with in private finance and elsewhere to make that happen. So this is our plan: pursuing clean power by 2030 and bring the benefits to families as quickly as possible to help with the pressure of affordability that so many face. The last point I want to make is this, and you'll have heard this during the course of today, and I don't want to drag you into politics, but I think there are two roads opening up for Britain, and we need to be candid about that, in a way that hasn't been true for 2 decades. One road is a sprint to clean power, a partnership between industry and government, which I've talked about. The other road is doubling down on our exposure to fossil fuels, and I believe, I submit, turning our back not just on the progress in clean energy of the last 15 months, but actually on the partnership of government and business over at least 2 decades in the UK. Now, I think going down the second road would lose the good jobs that I see you creating from this huge economic opportunity, the energy security and sovereignty which is within our reach, and of course our efforts on the climate crisis. And I think actually waving the white flag in the climate fight would mean we were rightly held in infamy by future generations. I would certainly be held in infamy by my kids, even more so than now. They are 16 and 14. Now, look, I want to just make this final point to you, which is I know that as businesses, you will see that this breakdown of the consensus poses a challenge to our shared agenda. But look, I am really confident that we can persuade people that the road we have chosen is the right one. And that's for a number of reasons. Because the country wants a positive vision and hope for the future. And if I can put it this way, you are all in the hope business. You know, I always say to people, we are not just the people in the disaster avoidance business in multiple generations' time. We are the people in the better lives business today. You know, when I talked recently to an apprentice at Sizewell C, you know, he was absolutely buzzing with the opportunities that this was creating for him. He wasn't having to leave his hometown, and he saw this future ahead of him. And there'll be 1,500 more people like him at Sizewell C. And then for every Sizewell C, there's an example that you'll have around the country. That is about being the hope business, and I think this country wants hope, and this country wants optimism. So you're part of this positive vision and hope for the future. The economics has changed in all recognition. Whatever the challenges, the trend is clear. The economics has moved in the direction of clean energy. That's what you see all across the world, and that's what you see in the UK. And for that reason, this is the answer, as I've been arguing today, to the affordability challenges that families and businesses face. End on this point. Genuinely, I feel humbled to be the Energy Secretary with this fantastic industry. And together with you, I'm determined that we make the right decisions in the months and years ahead to show the British people how our shared agenda can deliver for them. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ed. So we're now going to take a couple questions from the audience, and we'll start with Mary Starks, Vice President for Policy, Regulation and Risk at OVO.
Thank you. Is this working? Yeah. Good. Thank you for your speech and also your ambition and resolve on on this important agenda. An investor recently explained to us that they are unwilling to invest in the UK energy retail market because, and I quote, "We just struggle with the regulatory environment and how Ofgem has been treating energy retailers. The price cap, the capital requirements, all seems very disjointed, political and hard to underwrite." We've heard a lot today about the difficult politics in the sector, your two roads. Are investors also right to worry about the politicisation of regulation?
Well, Mary Lou, thank you for your question. It is an important one. I don't think they are. I mean, let's look at the sort of history of this. I bear a degree of responsibility for the energy price cap, as you know, once called Living in a Marxist Universe by David Cameron, but leave that to one side, and then adopted by Theresa May. But the reason for the energy price cap and the reason why I believe in the energy price cap is it provides a guarantee of protection for consumers, particularly those consumers who don't switch. We are, as you know, in the middle of an Ofgem review, and we'll be coming out with the results shortly. We want that review to be a pro-growth, an outcome that is pro-growth, a regulator that you can have confidence in. Now, look, a bit like what I said about government, I think even more perhaps with regulators, it's hard to please the industry you regulate, but we want it to be strategic and outcomes focused. And that is really, really important to us. And, the government has an important agenda in reducing the burden of regulation. I think it's important that you ask the question. We do want to see investment in the sector, and we want, and I know Johnson really takes this incredibly seriously, we want a regulator that will enable the innovation, the investment, and growth that the sector needs.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Mary. Next, we're going to go to Darren Davidson, Vice President of Siemens Energy in UK and Ireland.
Hi, Darren.
Hi. Thanks for the speech. It's very clear your enthusiasm and passion is right behind the CP30 plan. When we consider the CP30 plan, it's very clear that we have some strong momentum.
Yeah.
I think the work that's been achieved on grid is very significant, and I also think that there's some comfort that we're sort of heading in the right direction from a offshore wind and future auction rounds. One aspect where I don't personally feel as though we've made the progress to date is on hydrogen, both in production of hydrogen and aspects of long-duration energy storage. I do feel it maybe lacks the spark to get moving. What can we do to get that moving in the next 12 months or 24 months to get some momentum in hydrogen space?
Okay, look, it's a really good question. And Darren, I'm not just saying this, but I really want to give you personally a shout-out for the work you do, and Siemens a shout-out for the work that it does in the UK and the manufacturing, because it's a really living, breathing example of exactly what I was talking about. And you and I have had fantastic discussions about place by place, this shows the impact that clean energy, and you are showing the impact it can have. Look, on hydrogen directly, there are clearly challenges across the world in relation to hydrogen. And, one of the consequences or implications of the speech I've given is, every pound on the bill is something we need to look at. And obviously this is, the hydrogen is largely levy funded. And that is, important as we seek to bear down on bills. That said, and maybe this is what governments say, but I genuinely believe this, we have made progress. We've got the HAR1, we've got 10 contracts signed, and I think one of the plants is actually going to be operating either later on this year or next year. We've got HAR2 shortlisting, which has happened, and we're aiming to announce the results by early next year. And we've then also got the development of the first regional hydrogen transport and storage network, which I think is a really, really important outcome of the spending review as part of the biggest clean energy investment that we've ever seen in this country. And again, I think that is important. So, it's always the case with nascent industries that they're going to face challenges. I just want to, for you but other people in the room, I really want to underline that despite the challenges, our commitment to hydrogen is an absolutely important part of the energy mix.
Super. And then just moving on to our final question from Marguerite Sayers, Deputy CEO of ESB.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for taking the time to be with
Not
us.
at all.
We really do appreciate
Pleasure.
it. You spoke very compellingly about the need for investment in infrastructure, and if I was an investor, I'd have been very buoyed by that, but not every investor has the opportunity to hear from you directly. So just in terms of the misinformation and the myths and the, I suppose, distractions that are taken away from the decarbonisation story that are out there, how can we settle the nerves of investors in infrastructure, because we so badly need it and they are hearing a lot of negative stuff about the industry at the moment?
So really, look, it's in a way the million-dollar question is really important question. I mean, we could talk about this for a couple of hours. Don't worry, I'm not going to do that. So I would say a few things. First of all, to investors and to this audience, don't overstate the public backlash, because I think part of the strategy of the people who want the backlash is to claim there is a bigger backlash than there is. Frankly, I think the British public is broadly speaking where it's been before, which is they believe in tackling the climate crisis. They believe in the benefits of clean energy, much more actually than before Russia invaded Ukraine, because they saw the impact of fossil fuels and they want it done in a way that is good for their standard of living. And if you talk to some of the best pollsters, people like Luke Trill from More in Common, I really recommend you look at Luke's work, because he says to me often the biggest disjuncture he sees between Westminster perception and public perception is around climate and net zero. So that's the first point. Sort of second point, my reassurance to investors is we're a government with a stable majority, elected for 5 years, with a clear plan, and we're sticking to that plan. We've got our carbon budget growth and delivery plan coming out later this month. We saw in the budget spending review, big investment in clean energy, as I've said. So secondly, we're absolutely and in a way that just wasn't true 15 years ago. No disrespect to the last Labour government. This is absolutely the mainstream of the Chancellor's economic strategy and indeed the Prime Minister's mission for the country. And Gordon and Alistair in the last Labour government, of which I was part, was supportive, but it was just much more on the margins of our central economic strategy. It's the second point. Third point, maybe also important for this audience, how do we win the argument? And I think there's two things I would say about winning the argument. The first is implicit in what I said earlier, or explicit, which is we win the argument place by place. Big numbers are fine, but I always think of Anna Turley, now the chair of the Labour Party, and she always says, look, in Teesside, net zero Teesside changed the perception around climate and clean energy, because, it's an actual project that is happening, that is employing people, that is going to make a difference to providing the kind of good jobs. And you can say the same about Sizewell, about what Darren is doing, about all of these things. So we're going to win this argument place by place. And then the other part of it is, the other part of winning this argument is translating the benefits into tangible results in terms of clean power and the way it can lower bills. I'll give you an example. Great British Energy has putting solar panels on the rooftops of 250 schools in England, 250 or so NHS sites. Again, showing people the direct benefits we get. The reason I mentioned rooftop solar earlier on, again, it's a potential example of where people can absolutely see the benefit with their own eyes. I'll end on this point. Maybe it's a sort of good point to end on. Just like I'd say don't overstate the backlash domestically, also don't overstate it internationally. You know, look, I came back from New York Climate Week 2 weeks ago. People are getting on with it. You know, when you look at Pakistan, for example, and the way Pakistan has seen solar absolutely take off in the last 2 or 3 years, it's because of the economics. And the reason why I feel, and you know, look at the investment there was last year globally in clean energy compared to fossil fuels, something like 2 to 1. So, in a sense, I think part of this is that we can, you know, there's David Cameron, my old nemesis, once said that Twitter is not the real world. That was after I lost the election, and I never thought I would agree with him, but I do agree with him on this. You know, people make a lot of noise. The British public is in a sensible place on this. They don't want the Climate Change Act ripped up. They don't want us to go backwards. They know this is the future. As long as we make it happen in a way that benefits them, and that is what we're going to do, we can definitely win the argument, reassure the investors, and provide the hope that I think all of you do so brilliantly. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ed, for your time today, but also for your engagement over the past year. To close off today's conference, we're going to be joined by the Right Honourable David Laws, Chair of Energy UK, who will share a few reflections and closing remarks.
Thank you very much indeed, and thanks to all of you who have joined us at the conference today in what has been, I think, our most successful and well-attended Energy UK conference in terms of the numbers of people who've been here and have joined online. And right from Dara's speech and Chris's speech first thing in the morning through to the Secretary of State a moment ago, I think we've had a fascinating range of speakers, and I hope you very much enjoyed all of that. I'm conscious that we're running over time a little bit, but I would like to just say a few things in order to draw proceedings to a close. Firstly, a few words of thanks, obviously, to all of you who have attended today and been here right through what has been quite an elongated day. And it was clever of our organisers to put the Secretary of State on right at the end, so there was no temptation by any of us to slip off. But thank you for being with us for all of the day. Thank you also to E.ON Next, our headline sponsors, and to LCP Delta, who are also sponsoring the drinks in a moment, as they mentioned. And thanks to the other 7 sponsors who I won't name individually, but who've been with us and been present in the room outside. I'm very grateful to all of the panellists we've had here today, as well as to the headline speakers, the speakers from the Young Energy Professionals Group, and obviously to the speakers from the sort of Westminster world. And finally, I want to thank the Energy UK team who have been so critical to this, our compares Shauna and Max, who have done a great job, and Alex and Charlotte in our events team. Finally, on the thanks, I want to pay tribute to our sign language interpreters, who are David and Anne-Marie, who have been with us right throughout the day, and who drew this short straw of doing an energy conference and having to navigate all of the technicalities of energy policy. Dara did tell me earlier on, admitted to me, that you two are pretty much the only sign language experts in the country willing to take on an all-day energy conference without seeing all the speeches in advance. I hope I haven't pushed up their attendance fee for next year as well by that admission. So thanks to you and all the others. I think I could read that one myself. Secondly, just a couple of words about the debates we've heard today. You'll be hugely gratified to know that I'm not going to try to sum them all up. I'm also going to apologise to anybody who hates politics for the fact that we had quite a political afternoon. And for a while I did worry about whether landing 3 big political speakers on you was too much and whether you'd be beginning to fear that a general election was in the offing. But as we've heard today from speakers of political backgrounds not, whether we like it or not, this has become a highly political topic, and the divisions over policy direction are there in politics, not only in our own country but across the world, and we have to engage with that. And on a positive note, I think we are fortunate to have in the Secretary of State we heard today, his shadow, and Ed Davey, all people have held the brief at different times over the last 15 years, 3 really impressive individuals with different views and different perspectives, but all now experienced, all committed in this area, all intellectually able, which is something that, as all of you know, you need to be to master the complexities of probably the most complicated policy brief that there is in government. And all of them have been involved in this for quite a long period of time, at a time when our politicians have a tendency to revolve rather rapidly. So that is something that we should be grateful about. But it's clear that there is quite a division that's opened up, both within the UK and internationally. And those on the net zero end of the argument have to do more, I think, to show how this energy transition can be affordable for the public, continue to command the public support that it has done up until now, and how also we can protect key sectors of the economy and make sure that we're not simply exporting jobs to other countries. On the net zero sceptic side of the argument, I think the challenges for those advocates are just as significant. To explain how their policies would address the present realities and threats of global warming, and also how they would be able to deliver energy security and price stability in a world that could leave us dependent on many of the shocks that we've experienced in this country, not just over the last decade, but
4K. Beyond 4 times the resolution of 1920 by 1080, it will take you to another world. It is a world seemingly familiar, yet filled with fresh revelations. A young planet called Earth. Sony 4K captures nuances that escape the naked eye to show you reality with colors and clarity that awaken all your senses and resonate deep inside. If you think you've seen it all, prepare to be amazed. This is Sony 4K. This is a new dawn. It is a world seemingly familiar, yet filled with fresh revelations. A young planet called Earth. Sony 4K captures nuances that escape the naked eye to show you reality with colours and clarity that awaken all your senses and resonate deep inside. If you think you've seen it all, prepare to be amazed. This is Sony 4K. This is a new dawn. Wake up. Open your eyes. This is Sony 4K. Beyond it is a world seemingly familiar, yet filled with fresh revelations. A young planet called Earth. Sony 4K captures nuances that escape the naked eye to show you reality with colors and clarity that awaken all your senses and resonate deep inside.